So here at West Valley Bible Church, we want to be about making disciples and teaching them as we live our normal everyday lives. And so we've structured ourselves where we have this elder oversight, where there's an elder and they have this close relationship with a community group leader or house church leader. And we've structured ourselves in that way very intentionally. You know, how does this help allow or drive unity in our doctrine, and then diversity in our form or our expression? Jay, what do you think about that?
Well, what we're doing is a life-on-life process, and it's doing life together. And the only way you can do that is have a structure that encourages relationships. And to drive that deep into the body, is the more decentralized and smaller the unit, the more intensified it becomes. Well, one factor that's woven in the process is the way we train, the way we choose to train. It's not training somebody for ministry, it's training somebody in ministry. That means while doing the ministry, you're being trained simultaneously. So that's a key factor of why we take that approach.
So Jay, you have a number of guys that are under your shepherding. So just talk a little bit about your interaction with them, and kind of what are your goals, and what are you praying about, and what are you thinking about, and what are you dialoguing with them throughout the week?
Knowing their objectives and what they want to accomplish, and how's it going, what's not working, what is working, what adjustments they need to make at what time. Just a couple of weeks ago, I basically asked the permission of a group leader to permit me to speak to the group, and basically challenged them that they were beginning to become to receive and not to give. So they're waiting back for the leader to provide the input, and they would just receive it. So I said, you need to step up. You should work towards the leader only doing about 35% of the speaking, the rest of the time you and the group participating. And so it'd be an example of how I would come alongside of a leader just to help enable him to enable the group.
So given your time and availability to be with that leader, it sounds like you're sort of maybe even customizing how you interact with each leader, and just some of the things that you need to address.
Yeah, that's a key part. You want to be there, but you want to be in the way. You want to be available, but not in the way.
Jay, so explain the difference. And you gave me this concept many years ago, but I still think it's very real and valid for today. What's the difference of discipling for ministry rather than in ministry?
Well, the typical pattern for the traditional pattern for the traditional church, especially in the West, is that of formal education. And we think that the only way that you can train somebody for ministry is to send them to a place where that's concentrated on academics. And it isolates the knowledge part from the character part and from the ministry skills portion. But by doing the training in the context in ministry, while he's in ministry, he's developing the skill, he's also gaining knowledge, and he's also developing his own character and the character of those he's with. So it's a unified system in that fashion. You don't graduate from something because it's lifelong learning. It's not starting a course to finish it. It's just continually progressing in the learning and giving and serving dynamic that just never ends. As you move along, there's somebody not far as long as you are, so you reach back to bring them along. There's somebody ahead of you that you reach out to bring you further along.
And to kind of give an example of that, it seems like that's exactly what Jesus did. He took them out of their comfort, out of what's familiar, and in the context of them sharing the gospel, he trained them. In the context of going all over, he trained them in how they should function as disciples and disciple makers, actually.
Yeah, and sometimes it's like with Jesus, sometimes with 3, sometimes with 12, sometimes with 20, sometimes with 70. And that's the way it is for us as well. We have to sometimes be with 3, just maybe 3 group leaders. Another time it's 12, it's a big group. It depends on the dynamic of how we just develop the body and build it up.
So would it be fair to say when someone joins West Valley Bible Church, what they are in fact joining is a group of people that are following, ultimately we're following Jesus, but we're following the elder leadership, right? Sort of like someone's like, when they're joining a church with a building, it's easy, I go to this place on Sunday. But kind of the structure we have right now is when they join a house church gathering, they're joining a leader who then has a relationship with an elder. Would that be sort of the heart of what people are joining, or what you want them to feel like when they join our church?
Well, yeah, the typical pattern is we have a building where spiritual things take place. We have a professional staff that's been professionally trained that are the ones that credentialed to do the work of ministry. Your role is to pray for them and support them financially and show up with their things.
That's not what we're doing, right?
That's what we're trying not to do, because that doesn't make disciples. That make disciples. It gives out information, it gives out services, but it doesn't mean that person is moving along in their integrity of their spiritual walk and reproducing themselves in the lives of other people. About a year ago, I was with my brother in Salt Lake, and before I arrived, he had two key church leaders in the city that he wanted me to meet with because he wanted to ask me some questions. And one of the questions they asked me is, how soon do you start somebody in the training process? If you have a new believer, when do you finally start them in the training process? And I said, day one. And they said, day one? Like, how can you start a brand new believer? This is very easy. The first thing you train to them is start praying for some friends that they could begin to see them come to Christ, and begin to ask them who is somebody that might already be ready to hear the story of how they've come to know the Lord. That's training them day one, starting that process, and it doesn't stop.
So this idea of making disciples, it is your desire as an elder that everyone in our church has this priority, this value of making disciples.
Yeah, I could give you another example. The typical pattern is we come to the Lord, we come to know Christ. Now we have to grow. And after grown enough, then we can begin to begin active in ministry, especially when it comes to reaching out to other people who don't know the Lord. So we think it's come, grow, go. But one church describes it to their people with a lighthouse, and they show at the bottom is where you plug into Christ. The vertical part of the lighthouse is the growing process where you keep growing and growing and growing until finally you reach the point where you can turn the light on. But I asked them, the elders, one question. When you plug in, when does the light come on? When do you plug in? So the point is, it's engage, go, and while you are engaged in going, you will grow. So the growing comes in the process of the going, rather than waiting to go until you think you've grown enough, because we never think we've grown enough.
So
yeah, I was just reading, I'm sorry, I talk way too much, so I'll try to keep this brief. But I'm reading in Matthew, and Jesus comes to Matthew and says, follow me. The very next verse, he's having a big party with all his buddies who were not good people, but Jesus was there among them, and he wanted to introduce them to Jesus. So there was no training, there was no 6 weeks, and then maybe we'll take you out for a few days. It happened that very day for Matthew.
Yeah.
So there's serious growing in the going. Right, Rod?
that's right. I think of the woman at the well. She came to Christ and started sharing her faith.
I was thinking of the 12 and the 70, actually.
In the best growing is while you're going. Otherwise, because it gives a different meaning to it versus I'm just studying how to talk to somebody or whatever. You know what I mean? It's so different when you're actually doing it. You're going to learn more. It's going to be more meaningful. You're going to remember more. It's a much better way to grow.
Yeah.
You're not looking for academic answers either. You're looking for life application.
Yes, which is practical.
Yeah.